Hello everybody, welcome to a World of Warships video, another loadout video. This time we are looking at cruisers. So destroyers was pretty simple, if you saw that video, which is basically build for stealth, build for speed. Cruisers is a little bit more complicated, and some of that's because I haven't made up my mind. But let's start real simple, real basic, real simple, because I have one fairly standard build for one fairly standard line. And that is the British cruiser line, and my build is the stealth build. So it is turret traverse, it is steering traverse, and it is concealment system modification 1. And where I can, I put historical camo on, and where I can't, seaborne assault. And what that does is that turns these little ships into destroyers. So if there's no destroyers on the enemy team and no destroyers on your team, then you're the scout. But it can actually play those roles pretty well. Now, the reason I put the surface detection on isn't really to avoid battleships, because that's really quite difficult as soon as you open fire. The purpose is to basically get in as close as possible with the destroyers at the start of the game, or later on in the game when you can manage to get yourself disengaged, so that they have as little reaction time as possible. And all my British cruisers have this build out until something happens at tier 8, and that is I replace the turret traverse with the main battery shell dispersion. And one of the reasons I get away with that is main turret traverse speed. So this is still a knife fighter. They get less knife fightery as they become larger and less agile, but basically that is one fairly standard build, and it's seen here as well. Now, and I did notice my win rate, and maybe it's my style of play, but I did notice my win rate improving with this style of build. Now, the other thing you'll notice that all those ships have smoke. And what that means is that if you stop firing, pop the smoke, stay in the smoke for a bit, turn your way slowly towards the exit as much as you can and get up to speed. By the time you exit the smoke, your concealment could be back down to your default, which is, in the case of the Huanghui, 6.5 kilometers. Which I'm going to have to say is actually less than the base concealment of some of the larger destroyers. I think that is the best concealment of any cruiser. Well, no, actually the Lander at 6.45, and the Sirius. They are very stealthy ships. So now you do need to get good at dodging close range torpedo salvos, but that's something for a different video. Right, let's go step aside. Now the other thing is just like with the destroyers, I've set the filter for tiers 6, 7 and 8. Tier 5, like with the destroyers, what I'll do is I will take what I can from the list that you're seeing and fill in those things that that don't exist. Like, for example, there's no concealment system modification at tier 5, so it'll probably be traverse or something like that. The Japanese cruisers are fairly consistent, and I did originally try a stealth build on the Miyoko, and the problem is once you fire, you're basically visible, and unlike the Huanghui or the British cruisers, you haven't got the smoke to break contact, so you have to break contact some other way, and you haven't got the agility to sort of dodge until you can break contact. So really what I've done is I've gone for a traverse and acceleration, because those are the best ways to try and jink and dodge shots and torpedoes. The Takao is the same as the Miyoko, apart from the fact that turret traverse is replaced by dispersion. These are a fairly long range ship, so it doesn't have turret traverse. It has a little bit of turret traverse because of the elite gun operator, but very much it's a longer range ship. Speaking about fairly consistent long range ships, The Russian cruiser line consists very much in the same line as the Japanese, apart from the shores where I've been experimenting with deck protection. And to be fair, I probably should do the same with the Shabby, but my sort of default is turret traverse or dispersion if it's available, engine accelerator, and traverse and steering for the larger, less agile cruisers. And as you'll see, it's fairly standard. The Duca d'Aosta is the same. Charles Martel is the same, apart from the fact that it's got dispersion in that first slot. Algeria is the same, and La Glaçonnière is completely different, and that is because it is an older style. This is before I really learned how to use the acceleration properly, so I probably need to update that. But as you can see, I've got reload, because, well, I'm experimenting with reloads. De Grasse is the same. It's got a quasi concealment build, but because it's really best at long range, I'm going for the rate of fire to try and bring that down rather than turret traverse, which isn't really necessary. So as you can see, every 7.19 seconds it can fire 9 shells or 6 shells to the front with a 7% fire chance. So it's a pretty good fire starter. The German line is similarly tangled up. The Nuremberg is a bit of an experiment. I've got a concealment build. Originally it was traverse, 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 so turret, traverse, steering and steering. The York and the Admiral Hipper are, well, they have got a slightly different build, and that is that they've got double traverse, and that's because of my style. I'm fairly aggressive. It is fairly close in with these guys. They are tough and they can take it. It's got turret traverse, but that traverse means that I'm more able to, I find that these ships are too sluggish, and that's not my style. And at long range, the gun dispersion isn't as good, and the York has extremely slow shell time, so it's not as good. It tends to get chewed up by Russian cruisers, so I try and bring it into the medium range, which requires a bit more agility. Admiral Hipper is exactly the same. It's one of my favourite ships, and in fact the Admiral Hipper is interesting in that this guy is assigned to the Admiral Hipper, not to a battleship, because I have the turpets so I can put them on. So if I want to put him on a battleship, I can just drop him in the turpets for free. So he's a cruiser captain. The final set to look at is going to be the American cruisers, and they are a little bit scrambled, and that's because this is where I was learning. So the Pensacola, I'm not sure when I upgraded that. The Dallas, I've gone for a bit of rapid reload with all those guns to see if I can try and eke some more damage out of it. New Orleans is in a state of disrepair because I got grumpy after being targeted by Tier 7, I think a cargo or something. And what I did was I loaded it up completely for AA. So I would take the Auxiliary Armor Modification 1. I took the Air Defense Modification 2 and the Air Defense Modification 1, dropped it all in there, and discovered it made very little difference. So I'm slowly in the process of working back what it could have, what it can have. Originally it had steering and turret traverse because it was one of my older style builds. Helena is also a work in progress. Turret traverse, because I'm not really wanting to put all those guns at risk, and maybe I should go for reload. These ships turn fairly well, so it's a bit hard working out what to put on the light cruisers. American cruisers do actually have reasonable turns once you understand. You know, once you get the rudder going, and if you're able to predict a bit, they actually, once they get into turn, they turn around pretty quick. So putting traverse like on the Admiral Hipper, which is a bit sluggish, isn't really beneficial. So we've experimented by putting concealment, but maybe I should put deck protection. The Atlanta's completely different. I think that middle slot has acceleration to try and shake off some long range fire, but basically it's spec'd out for AA. I'm hoping to get the legendary captain Thomas Kincaid and drop him in here to make him a ruthless plane shooting down monster against those tier 7 carriers, although often enough I end up in games where there's no carriers, so that's pretty much a waste of slots, but still it's pretty murderous against destroyers. Brooklyn, pretty standard stealth build. It's one of the ships, the cruisers that I'd had before I'd matured my model. Cleveland is very much like the Helena, taking some liberties to provide some deck protection so that I can spam and not get spammed in return. It's got dispersion. It has fairly quick rotating turrets, so that's not an issue. Yeah. Essentially, these, although all the slots are filled now, for many games I fought with them with some slots empty as I spent time trying to work my way up to what they should have. The Wichita it has good AA, so that middle slot, it turns well. I mean, the real problem with this ship is this shocking main battery range, which only gets worse with the Baltimore. So, yeah, I've tried to stick a bit of AA in it and just a random empty slot to see if I can bolster that up and just make it a little bit more ruthless. But I've got to say that I'm not entirely convinced that increasing the AA is a great investment, because the enemy doesn't know that you've got increased AA. And if they're going to attack you, you're just going to shoot down more planes, which is going to make you feel better, but it doesn't really do a great lot to protect you, especially in someone who tends to get a little bit separated from the pack like myself. So those are the cruiser layouts. Essentially, there is a stealth layout, which I use for the smoke light cruisers. There is a steering and acceleration layout that I use for heavy cruisers, apart from the German cruisers, which have everything pushed into steering because they are more brawlers. And then there's the American light cruiser line, where it's pretty random. Anyway, I hope that was useful, and thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.